Hello friends, now we will be dealing with the National Guidelines of HIV Care and Treatment 2021 given by NACO, that is National AIDS Control Organization, and WHO, and we will be reading about the clinical features, pathophysiology, epidemiology, and the management of HIV in pregnancy. So a person may be an HIV positive but not have disease. A HIV infected person may develop AIDS for 10 years or longer. Incubation period varies from exposure to the clinical disease from 3 to 6 weeks, and acute HIV infection usually lasts up to 10 days. Now, what does the statistics show? Globally, there were 13 lakh pregnant women with HIV in 2020, which is an estimated 85% received ARV drugs to prevent MTCT. PTCT contributes 4% of the HIV infections, while among them in 2020, 3.5% are CLHIV. There was 50%, 55% decline of annual new HIV infections among children between 2010 and 2020, while the MTCT rate has fallen down from 27.4% in 2020 to 40% in 2010. Now, what is the pathophysiology? This HIV virus infects the human body by attacking the immune system, and hence symptomatology occurs. So, the first step in the infection is entry and initial infection. HIV enters the body either through sexual route, blood route, or parenteral or route, or vertical transmission, that is maternal to child transmission. These viruses specifically target CD4 T helper cells, macrophages, and the dendritic cells. And for entry, they take GP140 as a receptor. Then binding to CD4 receptor and co-receptors leads to fusion of viral envelope with the host cell membrane, which allows entry of the viral RNA. Now, what happens inside the host cell? The RNA integrates into the host cell after getting converted into DNA through reverse transcriptase enzyme, and the viral DNA integrates into the host genome known as a provirus. Now, this host cell machinery has been taken under control, and it will produce viral proteins. These viral proteins may be forming new virions which assemble and then bud off and released into the circulation. So this leads to continuous infection of new CD4 cells, and these CD4 cells act as persistent viral reservoir, and this occurs in the latency phase. Now, what happens that these CD4 T cells are progressively depleted due to the control of HIV virus, and it occurs due to either direct viral cytopathic effect, immune mediated destruction of CD4 cell, and apoptosis due to programmed cell death, and cysticium formation due to the fusion of infected cells. Now, this depletion of CD4 cell leads to immune system failure. As the CD4 counts declines, the cell mediated immunity or the CMI weakens, B cell function becomes abnormal, there is increased susceptibility to infection in the cancers, and when the CD4 counts falls less than 200 cells per microliter, then this condition is known as AIDS, also known as acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So because the CD4 cell count and the immunity has weakened, so this can cause opportunistic infections in the malignancies. Now, the common complication that can occur are tuberculosis, pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia or PCP pneumonia, candidiasis, Kaposi sarcoma, and lymphomas. These occur because the immune system can no longer control normally harmless organism. So, on the clinical progression phase, first one is acute HIV infection, where the CD4 cells are adequate in number, but the viral cells are very high, and this can create a flu-like illness due to high viral load. In chronic or latent phase, there were no symptoms, but there is active replications within the CD4 cells, and when the CD4 cell count is less than 200 and there is opportunistic infection, then patient develop AIDS, which is severe immunodeficiency syndrome and opportunistic diseases. Coming to WHO clinical staging, the HIV WHO clinical staging is divided into 4 parts. Clinical stage 1, where the patient is asymptomatic or there is generalized lymphadenopathy, which is PGL or persistent generalized lymphadenopathy. Then comes clinical stage 2, where the patient complains of moderate unexplained weight loss less than 10% of the measured body weight. Recurrent respiratory infections like sinusitis, tonsillitis, otitis media, pharyngitis can occur. There is occurrence of herpes zoster, angular chiliitis, recurrent oral ulceration, papillary pruritic eruptions, fungal nail infections, seborrheic dermatitis, etc. Now what happens in clinical stage 3? In clinical stage 3, the patient will have unexplained severe weight loss. So in clinical stage 2, the weight loss is less than 10% of the measured body weight, while in clinical stage 3, the weight loss is more than 10% of the presumed or measured body weight. Unexplained chronic diarrhea for more than 1 month, unexplained persistent fever, intermittent or constant for longer than 1 month can occur, and persistent oral candidiasis, oral hairy leukoplakia, pulmonary tuberculosis, while in this tuberculosis is not occurring. So tuberculosis occurs in third stage of HIV. Severe bacterial infections like pneumonia, empyema, pyomyositis, bone and joint infection, meningitis, bacteremia can occur. Acute necrotizing ulcerative stomatitis, gingivitis or periodontitis. Unexplained anemia where the hemoglobin is less than 8 grams per deciliter. Neutropenia, chronic thrombocytopenia can occur. Now what happens in clinical stage 4? Clinical stage 4 is characterized by HIV wasting syndrome, pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia, recurrent severe bacterial pneumonia, chronic herpes simplex infection, orolabial, genital, anorectal or more than 1 month duration or any visceral involvement. Esophageal candidiasis can occur along with candidiasis of trachea, bronchi and lung, extrapulmonary tuberculosis, Kaposi sarcoma, CMV infection, toxoplasmosis, HIV encephalopathy, extrapulmonary cryptococcus leading to meningitis, disseminated non-tuberculosis, mycobacterial infection, progressive multilocal leukoencephalopathy, chronic cryptosporidiosis, chronic isosporiasis, disseminated mycosis, lymphoma, either B cell, cerebral or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, symptomatic HIV associated nephropathy and cardiomyopathy. So these clinical stages normally do not occur in a normal patient with good immunity, but due to opportunistic infections in HIV, clinical stage 4 occurs. So, to summarize, at clinical WHO clinical stage 4 will have the following disease, means atypical tuberculosis, rare infections which could be bacterial, viral or fungal, malignancy, HIV associated organ damage can occur. There are signs. What are the signs of serious illness according to NACO? So, if the temperature of the patient is more than 39 degrees centigrade and along with headache, respiratory rate is more than 30 per minute, heart rate is more than 120 per minute, SpO2 is less than 90%. So whenever a patient comes to you in emergency, what do you check? So we check for the blood pressure, we check for the respiratory rate, we check for the heart rate, SpO2 and temperature. So omit blood pressure, what we can see is temperature means patient will be feverish 39 degrees centigrade along with headache, there is respiratory rate of 30, heart rate of 120 and SpO2 less than 90%. Along with that there is also presence of altered mental status, like patient can present in a confused state, strange behavior, reduced consciousness. Other neurological problem like persistent severe headache, seizure, paralysis, difficulty in talking, rapid deterioration of vision can occur. Any other condition that requires emergency management can also be there. Now what is the risk of exposure from different part of the body? Exposure to body fluid considered at risk. So if in an HIV infected patient you are coming in contact, so what are the body fluids that to be considered infected? Blood, semen, vaginal secretions, cerebrospinal fluid, pleural peritoneal pericardial fluid, synovial amniotic fluid. Other body fluids contaminated with visible bloods are also considered as infected. Now exposure to there are certain fluids which are not at risk, and unless these fluids contain visible blood. So tears are not infective, sweat, urine, feces, saliva, sputum and vomitus. So sputum and vomitus are not infected unless patient is having tuberculosis, and urine is also not infective. So if these fluids are containing visible blood, then these are infective. So this is the HIV transmission risk by different routes. So blood transfusion carry a transmission rate of more than 98%. So blood transfusion history is very important in such patients. And vertical transmission without any intervention, the risk it is 20 to 40%. While with intervention, the risk can be reduced to less than 1%. In sexual intercourse, the risk of transmission is 0.1 to 10%. Vaginal secretions contribute zero point 0 to 0.5 to 0.1%. IV drug abuse 0.67%, needle stick exposure 0.3%, mucous membrane splash to eye, oronasal secretions is 0.09%, needle stick injury for hepatitis B virus is 9 to 30%, while for HCV is 1 to 1.8%. So HCV 1 to 1.8%, but it is more serious because the treatment is not available for hepatitis C, while in hepatitis B virus the risk of transmission is very high, 9 to 30%, and in HIV needle stick injury risk is just 0.3%. So these are the risk of HIV transmission from mother to child. With pregnancy, risk of HIV transmission to mother to child is 5 to 10%. During delivery, the risk is 10 to 15%. If patient is not on ARV, not breastfeeding, then risk is 20 to 25%. But if the female is breastfeeding also, then risk is increased to 30 to 45%. If patient is on ART with breastfeeding, the risk is 2%. If patient is only on ART and there is no breastfeeding, the risk is further reduced to 1%. So what are the factors that affects maternal child transmission? So viral genotype and phenotype, viral resistance and viral load are important. Maternal risk factor depends maternal nutritional status, maternal clinical status, behavioral factors, whether ART is started or not, and maternal immunoglobulin immunological status. Obstetric complications like premature rupture of membrane or prolonged rupture of membrane for more than 4 hours. Mode of delivery, intrapartum hemorrhage, obstetric procedures, invasive fetal monitoring are the risk factors for HIV transmission to the child. Prematurity of the fetus is a risk factor for fetal infection, and genetic susceptibility is also a risk factor. For infants, breastfeeding is a risk factor, GI tract factors, and immature immune system contributes to infection to child. Now, what is the effect of HIV infection on pregnancy, and what is the effect of pregnancy on HIV? So, if there is pregnant female and HIV infection is there, then what this HIV infection can do is this can increase the risk of abortion by 3 to 6 times. Fetal growth restriction risk is increased 2 times. Preterm labor increased to more than 2 times. There risk of IUD, there is risk of maternal anemia, low birth weight, and prematurity. While if the female is pregnant, then what will this patient is already having HIV and she gets pregnant, then what will be the effect on HIV? The HIV infection has since development of fades because pregnancy is an immunocompromised state, and the CD4 count decreases due to hemodilution also. So after delivery, CD4 count because this hemodilution reverses, so the CD4 count increases by 50 to 100 cells per microliter. So all pregnant women should be tested for HIV and make the right decisions to get tested early for early ART treatment. Protect your child from HIV, and this is the helpline for HIV or AIDS. Dial helpline number 1097. Now, what contains a PPT-CT package? This is the essential package of PPT-CT services in which patient should be offered routine HIV counseling and testing. And if she wants to opt out of testing, she can opt out. This is an opt-out option. Family-centric approach is used. Provide lifelong ART. Provide care for associated conditions like STI, RTI, TB, and others. Promote institutional deliveries and perform plasma viral load testing at 32 to 30 weeks of gestation. And infants born to HIV positive mothers should be given antiretroviral prophylaxis. Proper nutritional counseling and psychological support should be given. Provide counseling and support for initiation of exclusive breastfeeding. Integrate follow-up of HIV positive exposed infants into routine healthcare services including immunization. Ensure initiation of cotrimoxazole therapy and EID using HIV TNA PCR at 6 weeks of age onwards, and strengthen community follow-up. So this we have uh, not discussed yet. This is a four-pronged strategy for PPT-CT. The first one is the primary prevention. So what we do, we prevent the arrival of the risk factor. So what we do is, so in prong 1, we prevent the infection to the childbearing age females. Then if the female is already diagnosed with HIV, then we can prevent unintended pregnancy in prong 2. And if she already got pregnant, then we can prevent maternal to child transmission through proper care and guidance. And in prong 4, care support and treatment is given to HIV positive mother and their child and for the family. So this is a four pronged strategy to PPT-CT. So what interventions do we do during pregnancy? Provide HIV information to all pregnant women, prevention of PPCT through ART, referral for viral load between 32 to 36 weeks of pregnancy to determine the ARV prophylaxis of the child depending on the risk, counseling for institutional delivery, and counseling on infant feeding practices and the ARV prophylaxis. So routine care and assessment includes WHO clinical staging for tuberculosis, STI screening and treatment, a baseline CD4 count, antenatal care, invasive testing should be avoided, iron, calcium, folic acid supplementation, and start cotrimoxazole if the CD4 count is less than 350. So these are the list of investigation that we offer to a pregnant women. So what investigation do we do at the first visit, and they are only done once during pregnancy. So this includes blood grouping, HCV, HBV screening, and the VDRL testing. So every month we have to do her clinical evaluation, adherence counseling to the ART treatment we have given, weight gain, whether there is weight gain or not, and HB%. Now every 6 monthly we can do her LFT, RFT, blood sugar, serum electrolytes, lipid profile, urine routine and microscopy. While lipid profile is being done, we will tell it later. Now, what are the interventions during labor and delivery? So, the National Guidelines for HIV Care and Treatment 2021 follow safe delivery techniques, means standard work precautions, minimize vaginal examination, and use aseptic techniques whenever possible. Avoid prolonged labor, and to augment the labor or to shorten the duration of labor, we can consider oxytocin. We have to avoid early artificial rupture of membranes, and if we want fetal monitoring, then non-invasive methods of fetal monitoring should be encouraged, and invasive methods should be avoided. While delivery, there should be support of the perineum, and avoid routine episiotomy, avoid instrumental delivery as much as possible. Suctioning of the newborn should be avoided unless there is meconium staining of the liquor, and avoid milking of the cord. Early cord clamping is done. An infant should be handled with gloves until all the blood and maternal secretions have been washed off. We have to clean and wipe the baby's mouth, nostril as soon as the head is delivered to prevent the infection in the neonate, and initiate feeding within the first hour of the birth according to the preferred and informed choice of the couple. Considerations in mode of delivery in India: normal vaginal delivery is considered unless there is an obstetric indication for the cesarean section in this female. Now, what are the guidelines for infant feeding in HIV exposed? So, exclusive breastfeeding is recommended for first 6 months. If the child is more than 6 months of age, then breastfeeding should continue while complementary feedings are introduced. And mothers living with HIV should breastfeed for at least 12 months and may continue breastfeeding for up to 2 years, like the general population, while being on ART adherence. Breastfeeding is safe by giving ART to the mother and ARV prophylaxis of the baby with optimal adherence to ART. A suppressed neonatal maternal viral load. There is no difference in infant feeding guidelines of HIV exposed versus unexposed infant. So, HIV positive pregnant women is capable of giving birth to a healthy HIV negative baby. So, why we are going to start the ART in these patients? Because ART works for PPCT as well by reducing the maternal viral load, loading the fetus with antiretroviral drugs that can prevent the transmitted virions from replicating, improve overall health of the mother, and reducing the risk of transmission to the HIV exposed infant. In ART in pregnancy, it is recommended to provide lifelong ART for all pregnant and breastfeeding women living with HIV, regardless of their CD4 count, regardless of their clinical stage, and irrespective of the trimester of pregnancy. And these days we use TLD regime for pregnant women. So, what is TLD regimes in pregnant and breastfeeding women with HIV? So, the target group is given a fixed dose combination of TLD. TLD is tenofovir, lamivudine, and dolutegravir. Tenofovir and lamivudine is given a dose of 300. So, T for teen. ठीक है, तो 300 and dolutegravir is given 50 milligrams. So this tablet is given HS, means bedtime, and this has to be given once daily for including this can cover HIV-1, HIV-2 and HIV-1, HIV-2 co-infection also. And pregnant women with HIV should be educated about the side effect of these drugs, and applicable to pregnant women presenting an active labor also if there is no previous ARV. So if a pregnant female with active labor presents to you during labor pains, then you can start antiretroviral therapy in her also if she is HIV positive. Now, what are the ACOG recommendations? So, during intrapartum care, if HIV viral RNA level, so this depends on the HIV viral load. So, if the viral load is more than 1000 copies per ml, or the viral load is unknown, and we have to plan, then we can plan her cesarean delivery at 38 weeks of gestation because of high viral load. While if the viral load is more than 1000 copies, or the status is unknown, but patient is already in labor, or the rupture of membrane has occurred, then benefits of cesarean delivery is unclear, and we have to start the patient on oxytocin drip to cut short the second stage of labor and deliver her early. But if the viral load is less, means the copies are less than 1000 per ml, then vaginal delivery is permitted. Then we can start her on IV zidovudine unless the following criteria is met. Taking a prescribed, so if patient is already taking oral ART, HIV viral RNA copies are less than 50 ml, 50 copies per ml at 34 to 36 weeks of gestation or 3 to 4 weeks before delivery, then there is no need of starting IV zidovudine. But if the following criteria are not met, then we can start her on IV zidovudine. Now, what is CPT? CPT is cotrimoxazole therapy, which is given for chemoprophylaxis of pneumocystis cerevisiae pneumonia that can occur in HIV positive patient. So, what is the indication of chemoprophylaxis? If the CD4 count is less than 350 cells per mm cube, or patient is in WHO clinical stage 3 or 4, then we have to give a tablet of cotrimoxazole, double-stranded tablet each day daily. So, this cotrimoxazole contains sulfamethoxazole and trimethoprim. Sulfamethoxazole in a dose of 800 milligrams and trimethoprim in a dose of 160 milligrams, and this should be continued throughout pregnancy. It should be started regardless of the stage of pregnancy, and breastfeeding females are also advised to continue CPT if indicated, means if the CD4 count is less than 350 and WHO clinical stage 3 or 4 is there. Now, what is the association of TB with HIV? TB is responsible for 25% of all deaths among the HIV infected individual, and risk of active TB is 10 times higher in HIV positive females. So, in these females, the risk of maternal mortality, prematurity, low birth weight, infant tuberculosis and MTCT is increased by 2.5 times if HIV is also present along with TB. Now, for TB, we have to see the 4 signs at every visit. We have to look for if the patient is having current cough, fever episode, history of weight loss and night sweat. If the symptoms are present, we have to test the patient for TB, and if patient is positive for TB, then along with ARV, we have to start ART in this patient also. ART should be started within 2 weeks of starting ATT. Now, coming to infant ARV prophylaxis. So, the infants are divided into 2 parts, low risk infants and high risk infants. A low risk infant is one in which the mother is having a suppressed viral load, or the copies are less than 1000 copies per ml. So, in these only syrup is recommended, and just one syrup is enough. Either you can give syrup nevirapine or syrup zidovudine. So, this includes infants born to a mother with confirmed HIV-2, HIV-1 or HIV-2 combined infections, and the duration of giving this is from birth till 6 weeks of age. So, in low risk infants, either syrup nevirapine or syrup zidovudine is given from birth till 6 weeks of age. But if the baby is high risk, means infant is born to HIV positive mother and who is not on ART, either the mother is not on ART, or if the viral load is not done after 32 weeks of pregnancy, maternal viral load is not suppressed, means viral load is high from 32 weeks pregnancy till delivery, or there is new identified HIV positive within 6 weeks of pregnancy, means patient is newly diagnosed case of HIV. So already she is not on ART therapy. So if there is no ART, if viral load is not done, if viral load is not suppressed, or if the new identified HIV positive case is there, then we have to do a dual prophylaxis of the child. And in this dual prophylaxis we will give syrup nevirapine along with syrup zidovudine. And if baby is on exclusive breastfeeding, then from birth till 12 weeks of gestation we have to give dual prophylaxis. And baby is not on breastfeeding, then 6 weeks age is sufficient. Now this is the different drug doses of nevirapine and zidovudine. It comes in a syrup 10 milligrams per ml concentration, and zidovudine also. So if the if from birth till 6 weeks, if the weight is less than 2 kg, 2 milligrams per kg dose is given daily, and zidovudine 5 milligrams twice daily or BD dose is given. And this is the weight charts from 6 weeks to 6 months, 20 milligrams daily, 6 months to 9 months, 30 milligrams daily. Only nevirapine is sufficient, and till breastfeeding ends 40 milligram daily is given. Now, what are the specific interventions during infancy? Do reinforcement of exclusive breastfeeding for first 6 months. Immunization is necessary. Look for the sign and symptoms of HIV infection and follow up. ART prophylaxis should be started, and if the infant is HIV positive, then CPT is started, and early infant diagnosis can be done by DNA test at 6 weeks of gestation. Then we have to repeat test again after 6 weeks then we will repeat it at 6 months, 12 months and 18 months for HIV antibody testing. Now coming to contraception is for dual protection, both for prevention of sexually transmitted infections as well as unplanned pregnancy, and condoms together with another effective method to be used. So condoms can prevent STI risk and also unplanned pregnancy. Along with that, hormonal contraception, IUCDs are also recommended, but OCPs can interact with ART, and hence OCPs are contraindicated in these patients. Now, what is India's commitment to EMT-CT? So the goal is no child should be born with HIV and the mothers are kept alive. Now, the targets for process indicators for validation of EMT-CT to be maintained for at least 2 years are as follows. More than 95% of all estimated pregnant women are registered for antenatal care and receive at least one antenatal care checkup. So in more than 95% females, we have to register them and we have to give at least one antenatal care checkup. In more than 95% pregnant female, we have to check them for HIV, and more than 95% HIV positive pregnant women are to be given treatment also. So give a child love, laughter and peace, but not AIDS, according to Nelson Mandela.